who's actually going to get the most out of a Nord Stage 4 with 73 fully weighted keys, and who would be better off putting their money somewhere else. If you're wondering whether the price tag makes sense for someone who just needs a reliable piano for practice, or if it's really the workhorse a touring keyboardist has been hunting for, you're in the right spot. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When I first sat down with the Stage 4, the hesitation was real. I've tried a handful of stage pianos that promised studio-grade sounds, only to find they either felt too light for a serious pianist or got lost in a mix when I cranked the volume at a gig. The Nord brand has a reputation for deep sound libraries, but the price can feel like a gamble if you don't need all the bells and whistles. My goal in this review is to walk through the everyday scenarios that matter: rehearsal rooms, small club stages, home studios, and see whether the Nord strengths line up with the practical needs of those setups, or whether you're paying for features you'll never touch. Let's start with the feel of the keys. The 73-key layout is a compromise between a full 88-key piano and the more portable 61-key options you see on many synths. For gigging players who need a solid piano feel without hauling a massive instrument, the fully weighted action feels surprisingly close to an acoustic grand. I tested it by playing a Chopin Nocturne in a rehearsal space where the floor vibrated from a drum kit next door. The keys responded consistently, and the weighted mechanism gave enough resistance to keep finger strength in check, which is something a lightweight synth would miss. If you're a pianist who never wants to compromise on touch, those 73 keys hit a sweet spot. On the flip side, if you're primarily a synth programmer who values a slimmer profile for quick pitch bend tricks, the extra weight could slow you down. Sound-wise, the Stage 4 carries forward Nord's legacy of layered patches that can be swapped on the fly. In a live setting, that means you can go from a bright Rhodes tone in the first chorus to a heavy organ for the bridge without stopping. I ran a quick test at a small coffeehouse gig. The organ patch sat comfortably in the mix with a drum machine and an electric bass, while the piano patch still cut through when the vocalist hit high notes. The real value here isn't just the raw sample quality, it's the workflow. The split-screen interface lets you assign a piano sound to the lower half and a synth lead to the upper half, then toggle between them with a single button. For a gig musician who needs to cover multiple parts, that saves both time and rack space. The trade-off is that the interface can feel a bit dense if you're new to Nord's menu system. There's a learning curve before those patches become second nature. Now, let's talk about integration. The Stage 4 comes with a full suite of MIDI and USB connections, so you can route it straight into a DAW or use it as a master controller for external synths. In my home studio, I plugged the keyboard into Logic via USB, recorded a piano track, and then used the same USB channel to send MIDI to a VST synth for a synth string layer. The latency was negligible, which is critical when you're layering parts in real time. However, the unit doesn't have a dedicated headphone amp with independent volume control for each split section. If you rely heavily on silent practice with multiple sections active, you'll need an external mixer or a separate headphone amp to balance the levels. That's a small extra cost that can catch first-time owners off guard. Portability is another hidden factor. The Stage 4 isn't a suitcase-sized synth, but the 73-key version is lighter than the 88-key counterpart by about 2 kilograms. For musicians who travel regionally, say, a band that tours the East Coast, they'll appreciate that the keyboard can be loaded onto a standard gig case without a forklift. I took it on a 2-day tour in a van, and after a few loads and unloads, the keys still felt as tight as on day one. If you're a studio-bound player who never leaves your desk, that weight savings is less compelling, and you might find a more compact synth for the same price. One practical weakness that surfaces after a few weeks of use is the screen visibility under bright stage lights. The LCD is clear enough in dim rehearsal rooms, but when you're playing under a wash of white LEDs, the contrast drops, and you have to tilt the keyboard slightly to see the patch names. It's not a deal breaker, but it does mean you'll spend a few seconds adjusting your view during a set change. For a player who relies on quick visual feedback like a keyboardist who swaps patches every 16 bars, this could feel like an extra hassle. Battery life isn't a concern here because the Stage 4,